when I left my parents' house after my mom kicked me out, I mean, I panicked and um I remember thinking like, okay, like I am I'm on my own. Like, because the thing is, when you're a Jehovah's Witness and you get um basically shunned, um I knew that all the adults in my life that had pretended to be the people that I could go to in times of need or times of trouble, I knew that all of those people had already been informed that I was um, not to be sheltered or talked to or let in, because that's the way that the Jehovah's Witnesses do things. Um, and up to that point, I had been, I, I got a fake ID. I'd been going to San Francisco. I'd been meeting like older people. Um, and uh, I came in contact with some people that I never should have been in contact with at that age. Um, and of course, that's a whole nother story about our community and um, how so many young people in the queer community have to resort to things that they should never have to resort to. And me personally, I ended up, I ended up sleeping at my girlfriend at the time at her house. I would sneak in through her window and like spend the night at her house here and there. I would couch surf all over. There were times I slept in my car. Um, and I always maintained a job, but I was 16 years old, and it's not like I could go get an apartment or anything. Um, and I fell in with uh, a household in San Francisco, very loosely. And again, like I don't really, because after my mom burned all my journals and I realized like how dangerous it is to write your shit down and keep it somewhere where people can find it, I kind of quit writing in journals for a while. And also, I was working a few jobs and I wasn't like sitting around like writing in journals as much or didn't have the time to do that. Um, but basically, so I fell in. There was a guy in San Francisco who had a house, and basically, he was a big drug dealer. And he and I met, somebody took me to his house one night, and I did crystal meth for the first time. Um, and this is a kid, I was a kid who was raised a Jehovah's Witness. I was incredibly sheltered. But I was at the point where I was like, okay, this is what we do. Like, um, yeah. And that first night that I did crystal meth in this house in San Francisco, I will never forget. I was sitting, because basically it was a flat, and everyone in the flat worked for this one guy who also lived there. So everyone who had a room in the flat was dealing for him. And so we were in one of the rooms, and uh, I remember at one point some gentleman came in with a bag of change to buy drugs. And I remember thinking, wow, like that's really, really sad. Um, and there were some other things happening and going on that I don't necessarily feel like getting into all the details around. But I'm not sure how long I was kind of, I started running drugs here and there, around the city for this guy. He kind of, he was kind of sweet on me because his mom and my mom had the same name, and I don't know. But ultimately, there came a day when there was a big party at this house, and at that point, I don't know if Absolute Vodka was like fairly new on the scene. I just remember that it was supposed to be like the fancy vodka. And there were huge bottles of Absolute Vodka everywhere and drugs everywhere. And I don't even know how many drugs I had done at that point. But it got really bad. And I went to one of the guys that was living in the front room, and because I couldn't like open my mouth, and I went to him and I was like, I don't know what's wrong, something's wrong, like help me. And he gave me more drugs just in the other direction. So one minute I was like, oh, and I couldn't like open my jaw, and then the next minute I was just like, and then I would like go back up and back down, and I did this for a little while where my body was kind of like, what the fuck is happening? And at some point I was like, I need to get in my car and go find my girlfriend and tell her that I've been cheating on her with a girl that lives in this house. I thought that was a really good idea. So I got in my car and I drove down the peninsula because I knew she was at a party. And I remember like driving along on the 101, if you're familiar with the Bay Area. And I was fully hallucinating that there were like skeleton like people on the side of the road. I believed that they were after me. Um, and there's a lot I don't remember, but I remember that for some reason. And then I got to the house that my girlfriend was at, and I remember pulling up and stopping in the middle of the street. I didn't turn my car. I just like stopped and got out. And then after that, I don't remember anything um, until I woke up back in San Francisco in the hospital because everyone at the party had decided that I needed to go back to the city because I needed more drugs. And when we got back to that house, they said, no, you need to take her to the hospital and do not connect her to us. So they took me to the hospital, and their grand plan was just to like drop me off, um, or pretend like they didn't know my name. Anyways, somehow the staff had talked them into telling them who I was, and they had my driver's license and my parents' phone number, and they called my parents. And I didn't know this part of the story until my mom actually told it to me, because my mom had a way of being super proud of her cruelty. Like it was like a badge of honor if she, you know, chased someone down and gave them a piece of her mind, or she would walk up to people. This was back when there were smoking sections in restaurants, and my mom would literally walk up to a table, take a cigarette out of somebody's mouth and put it out. And she was really proud of this behavior. And so she very proudly told me that when the doctor from the emergency room called to tell them that I was there and what was happening, because I was 17 years old, my mom said, you can keep her. And the doctor said, you are legally obligated to come get your child. She's not 18 years old yet. So my parents came and picked me up and took me back home. And I never did drugs again from that point on, I mean, I smoked a little weed here and there. I microdose psilocybin. All of my friends after that point, the rave scene started to get really big. All my friends, we were going to raves, and I did not, from that moment on, I never touched another like hard drug. I was like, no, thank you. Um, but that is how I almost died um, at 17 years old of a drug overdose. And that's just one of my super fun stories. There is a follow up story to that, which I will get into at some point, that is actually like fucking hilarious and bonkers. Because if you've ever heard the term dyke drama, which back in like the 90s, dyke drama was like a well known phenomenon. I don't know. I mean, I'm 53 now. I don't know if this shit still exists. I'm sure it does, and there's probably a different term for it now, but we were in it pretty deep. And the story that follows up that takes me back to this house that I basically, did all the drugs and sold the drugs, and about 2 weeks later I end up back at that house. Um and that's a whole nother story. So stay tuned.